I'll never forget the sound of her voice that morning. Calm, steady, almost detached, when she said, "There are things you don't know about me, Clara. Things I've tried to bury." Her hands trembled slightly as she stirred her tea, the spoon clinking softly against the porcelain. Steam curled between us like a thin veil of secrets. I had gone into that kitchen thinking we were just two women sharing breakfast. By the time I left, I wasn't sure I knew who she really was anymore. It's strange how truth hides in plain sight, how you can live years under the same roof with someone, share holidays, laugh over small talk, and still never see the shadows flickering behind their eyes. That morning changed everything. But maybe I should start before the tea went cold, before the silence grew too heavy to lift, before the day I found out who my mother-in-law really was. Normal life set up. Before all of that, life in our home was quiet, predictable in the way small town life often is. My husband Daniel and I lived in his family's old house on Willow Street, the one with the cracked blue shutters and the front porch that creaked like it had its own stories to tell. His mother, Evelyn, moved in with us after Daniel's father passed away 2 years prior. I'll admit, at first I was nervous about it. Sharing a house with your mother-in-law isn't easy for anyone, much less for someone like Evelyn, a woman of few words and even fewer expressions. But she was polite, tidy, respectful of our space, and Daniel adored her, so I did my best to make it work. Our days followed a rhythm. Daniel left early for the construction company he ran with his brother, and I worked from home as a freelance designer. Evelyn tended to the garden, her straw hat bent low over rows of basil and petunias. Every evening, she'd hum while she cooked, an old melody I never recognized, but one that filled the kitchen with a quiet warmth. It was easy, for a while, to believe that was enough. Evelyn and I had our moments, the occasional disagreement over how to season stew or how long to steep tea. But there was something dignified about her calmness. I admired it. She had a way of observing life like she was standing just outside of it, collecting moments instead of living them. Then came Daniel's younger sister, Lily, who visited often with her two boys. Evelyn came alive around them, laughter echoing through the hallways, her usually soft eyes turning bright. I used to watch her from the kitchen doorway, thinking how different she looked when she smiled like that, like someone who remembered joy. We were a family that worked, maybe not perfect, but steady, and I truly believed I knew who Evelyn was. A graceful, aging widow who loved her family and her roses. Until the day I found the photograph. The first clue, suspicion. It started innocently enough. I was reorganizing the hall closet, something Evelyn had been asking me to do for months, and tucked behind a stack of faded winter blankets, I found a small wooden box. It wasn't locked, but it had a thin layer of dust on the lid, like it hadn't been touched in years. Inside were old photographs, sepia-toned, curled at the edges. Evelyn in her 20s, smiling beside a man that wasn't Daniel's father. At first, I thought nothing of it. People have pasts, old friends, stories before we knew them. But then I noticed something strange. The man's arm around her shoulders, the way she leaned into him, her face lit with a softness I had never seen before. There was a baby in one photo, a little boy with Evelyn's same almond eyes. But it wasn't Daniel. Something inside me stilled. I flipped through the rest, letters, neatly folded in looping script. The top one began, "My dearest Eve, I'll be back for you soon. Keep our son safe until then." My heart pounded. I wasn't sure what to think. A past relationship? A child she'd lost? Why had Daniel never mentioned a brother? I placed everything back, exactly as I'd found it. My fingers shook as I closed the lid. That evening, when Evelyn came in from the garden, I watched her closely. She wiped her hands on her apron, humming that same haunting tune. Busy day? She asked softly. Just organizing. Found some old photos. She froze. Just for a moment, barely noticeable, but enough. Her hand tightened around the dish towel, knuckles white. Oh, she murmured. Old things don't like to be disturbed, dear. Then she smiled, that polite, closed-lip smile of hers, and went on chopping onions. The air between us felt different after that. Heavier, charged with something unspoken. Over the next few days, I caught her watching me sometimes, her eyes lingering longer than usual. Once, I came into the kitchen and she quickly closed a drawer. Too quickly. At night, I'd hear her footsteps in the hallway, soft and uncertain, like she was pacing. Daniel noticed nothing. He was busy with work, always tired, always trusting. I told myself it wasn't my business. Everyone has their ghosts. But the image of that child's face, Evelyn's son, who wasn't my husband, wouldn't leave me. One morning, I decided to ask. We were having coffee, the sunlight filtering through the lace curtains. I chose my words carefully. Evelyn, did Daniel ever have a brother? Her hand paused midair, the spoon dripping coffee back into her cup. No, she said simply. Why do you ask? I hesitated. I found some pictures. You looked happy with a little boy. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, I thought she might answer. Then she stood, her chair scraping softly against the tile. Some memories are best left buried, Clara, for everyone's sake. And with that, she left the room. The conversation ended, but the silence that followed spoke louder than words. I knew then, whatever secret she was hiding wasn't small. It was something that could break us all. It's strange how silence can feel like noise once you start listening for it. After that morning, every sound in the house felt amplified. The tick of the kitchen clock, the creak of the stairs, the muffled voices from the television in the evenings. But underneath it all, there was something heavier, a kind of tension that hummed quietly between Evelyn and me, like a low electric current no one wanted to name. I tried to let it go. God knows I tried. But the thing about secrets is that they grow restless when you ignore them. A few weeks later, while Daniel was away on a work trip, I noticed Evelyn spending more time outside, near the old shed at the back of the garden. She'd carry small boxes or envelopes out there, locking the door behind her. When I offered to help one afternoon, she smiled faintly and said, "No need, dear. Some chores are personal." Something about that word personal stuck with me. That evening, after she went to bed, I stood at the kitchen window and stared out toward the shed. The moonlight spilled over the garden, soft and silvery, catching on the edges of her watering can. I could see the shed door slightly ajar. It wasn't curiosity that pushed me outside. It was something deeper, an unease that had started to feel like a splinter under my skin. The air was cool, damped with the scent of earth and rosemary. My hands trembled as I pushed the door open. Inside, the small space smelled of old wood and lavender. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, its pull chain glinting faintly in the dark. On a small table sat a stack of envelopes, yellowed and tied with string. Each was addressed in the same looping script I'd seen before. To Evelyn Carter, from Thomas Hale. I opened one. Eve, I can't stop thinking of you and the boy. I've written to the address you gave me, but the letters keep coming back. Are you still in Springwood? Please tell me you're safe. I'll come for you when I can. You have my word. The letter was dated 1978, 15 years before Daniel was born. I sank onto the stool beside the table, my pulse hammering. One envelope was torn open already, its paper smudged with what looked like tears. The note inside was shorter, desperate. If you get this, please forgive me. I never meant to leave you. They said it was better this way, for everyone. But I'll never forget our son. Our son. I didn't realize I was crying until a drop fell onto the page. Footsteps sounded behind me, slow, steady. "Clara," came her voice, quiet but firm. "Put that down." I froze. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her nightrobe drawn tight around her shoulders. The porch light behind her cast her in shadow. I'm sorry," I stammered. "I didn't mean to." She stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have come here." I held up the letter. "Who was he, Evelyn? Who was Thomas Hale? And the boy, what happened to him?" For a moment, I thought she might turn away again, slip back into that wall of silence. But instead, she sank onto the chair opposite me, her hands folding neatly in her lap. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "Thomas was my first husband." The words hit the air like stones in water. Daniel had told me his father was named Robert Carter, a kind, gentle man who died of heart failure when Daniel was a teenager. But this... I was young, too young. Thomas and I married in secret before my parents could stop us. He worked at the steel mill. We had a son, Jacob. His lips quivered as she said the name. When Jacob was 4, Thomas was arrested. They said he'd stolen from the mill, though I never believed it. The charges ruined us. My parents took me and Jacob back home, said Thomas was a disgrace. They burned his letters, told everyone he'd run away. Her eyes glistened, distant. But he didn't run. He came back. He tried to see us. My father refused to let him near. One night, there was a fight. The next morning, Thomas was gone, and Jacob was missing. I felt the air leave my lungs. "They said he drowned in the river behind our house," she whispered. "They never found his body. My parents buried an empty coffin." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The sheds seemed to shrink around us, the air thick with the weight of her confession. She said, "I married Robert years later. I thought I'd built a new life, but some things you can't bury. The past doesn't stay dead just because you want it to." Her voice cracked then. The first real crack I'd ever heard in her carefully controlled tone. She looked up at me, eyes brimming with tears. "Now you know." I wanted to say something, anything, but all I could manage was, "Why didn't you tell Daniel? He deserves to know." Evelyn's face tightened. "Because I won't drag him into my shame. He's finally happy. Why would I ruin that?" "Because it's not shame. It's truth." She looked away. The truth destroyed one family already. We sat in silence, the night pressing in around us. I could hear the crickets outside, the faint hum of a car on the distant road. In that moment, I realized I wasn't angry at her, not yet. I was heartbroken for her, for the years she'd lived with this quiet ache, pretending it was gone. But I also knew something else. Secrets like that never stay buried forever. When Daniel came home the next day, Evelyn was already gone. No note, no goodbye. Just the faint smell of lavender in the hallway and the empty space where her shoes used to be by the door. Daniel searched for her for days. He thought she'd gone to visit her sister up north. I didn't tell him what I knew, not yet, because a part of me needed to understand why she ran. And somewhere deep down, I had a feeling this story wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. For 2 days, Daniel called every relative he could think of. He drove to neighboring towns, stopping at small cafes and churches, showing old photos of his mother. Each time, he came home more defeated. "I just don't get it," he kept saying, rubbing the back of his neck. "She seemed fine, Clara. Why would she just leave? I couldn't look him in the eye. The truth sat on my tongue like a weight I wasn't ready to drop. That night, while he slept, I stood by the kitchen window again, staring out into the darkness. The garden looked strange without her. The roses she loved so much had started to wilt, as if they missed her too. The wooden box was still in the hall closet, exactly where I had found it. I pulled it out, hesitated, and then tucked the letters back inside. I told myself I wasn't meddling. I was trying to understand. I thought of her face in the shed, the way her voice had trembled when she said her son's name. Jacob. There was one photograph from that box that I hadn't returned. I kept it hidden in my desk drawer. The picture of Evelyn holding a small boy beside the river. The one she said had drowned. The next morning, I couldn't ignore the pull anymore. I needed to find out what had really happened. I started with the archives at the county library. The old building smelled like dust and lemon oil, and the woman at the front desk gave me a sympathetic smile when I asked about records from 1978. Hours passed as I combed through faded newspaper clippings. My heart raced when I found a headline that matched Evelyn's story. Local boy presumed drowned in Springwood River, body not recovered. The article named the child, Jacob Hill, age 4, son of Thomas and Evelyn Hill. There was a photograph, grainy but unmistakable. Evelyn looked younger, her eyes hollow, her hands clutching the handkerchief. The article said authorities searched for a week before calling off the investigation. It also mentioned Thomas Hale's prior arrest and disappearance. But something didn't add up. At the bottom of the article was a small, almost throwaway line. A man matching Hale's description was reportedly seen boarding a bus toward Greenville 3 days after his release. If Thomas had run, what if he hadn't been alone? I didn't tell Daniel what I was doing. I told him I was working on a project for a client in Greenville and drove out the next morning. It was a 2-hour drive, long enough to second-guess myself more than once. Greenville was small, quiet, the kind of place where everyone seemed to know everyone else. I stopped at the town records office and asked about Thomas Hale. The clerk was an older man, slow-moving but kind. He squinted at the name, typed it into his computer, and frowned. "We don't have a Thomas Hale, but there's a Tom Carter, moved here around 1979, died 6 years ago." My heart skipped. "Carter?" He nodded. "Yeah. Worked at the train yard. Wife passed before him. Says he had 1 kid. Adopted, I think. Name's Jacob Carter." I felt dizzy. Jacob Carter. I thanked him, though my voice barely came out. Outside, I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, my breath shallow. Could it be possible? Could Evelyn's son have survived? And if he had, did he know who he really was? I found the address listed on the file. A modest house on the edge of town. White with green trim, a tire swing hanging from a tree out front. My hands trembled as I rang the bell. A man in his 40s opened the door. His hair was dark with silver streaks. His eyes, almond-shaped, soft, eyes that I had seen before. "Can I help you?" he asked, cautious but polite. I hesitated, searching for words. "Are you Jacob Carter?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. And you are?" "My name's Clara. I think you might be related to someone I know." He looked wary. "You'd better come in." The living room was simple, clean, with family photos lining the mantel. A woman, 2 children, a dog. I pointed to one picture, Jacob as a young boy sitting on his father's shoulders. "Is that your father?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, Tom Carter. He adopted me when I was little. My mom passed when I was 4. He never told me much about her. Said it was complicated." My heart pounded. "Do you know her name?" I asked softly. He shrugged. "Only first name. Evelyn." The air in the room thickened. "Jacob, I need to tell you something. It might sound unbelievable, but your mother is alive." His face paled. "What?" "She's been living with me and my husband, your half-brother, Daniel." He stared at me in stunned silence. For a long moment, I thought he'd laugh, dismiss me as a crazy woman. But then his expression shifted, confusion melting into something raw and searching. I always felt like something was missing, like there was another piece of me somewhere else. He ran his hair through his hair, pacing the floor. "You're sure?" I nodded. "She told me everything, or most of it. She thought you died. She's been carrying that grief her whole life." Jacob's eyes glistened. "She thought I was dead?" "Yes." He sat heavily on the couch, staring at his hands. "I used to dream about her. I thought it was just a child's imagination, but I could see her face clear as day. I guess some things stay with you, even when you're too young to understand." I wanted to comfort him, but I also knew this truth would reopen wounds that never really healed. "Jacob," I said gently, "would you want to see her?" He looked up, tears streaking his cheeks. "If she's really alive, how could I not?" Driving back that evening, I replayed the conversation over and over. Part of me felt relieved, like I'd found something sacred, a missing piece of a broken story. But another part was terrified. Evelyn had run from this truth her whole life. How would she react when it came back to her in the flesh? And what would it do to Daniel, the son who never knew he wasn't her only child? As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I whispered a silent prayer. That the truth, after all these years, would heal more than it hurt. When I got home that night, Daniel was sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the road like he was waiting for someone. The porch light cast long shadows across his face. He looked exhausted, not just from the search, but from the worry that had started to settle into his bones. "Any news?" he asked as soon as I stepped out of the car. I hesitated, my heart twisting. I might have found something." His eyes snapped up. "You did? Where is she?" "She's not here, Daniel," I said softly. "But I found someone who might know her, someone connected to her past." He frowned. "Her past? What are you talking about?" I'd been dreading this moment, but keeping the truth from him any longer felt wrong. So I told him everything, from the letters to the photograph, to the night in the shed, to the trip to Greenville. Daniel didn't interrupt. He just sat there, silent, as the pieces fell into place. When I finished, he let out a shaky breath. "You're telling me my mother had another son before my dad?" I nodded. "She believed he died, but he didn't. He's alive, Daniel. I met him." For a long time, he didn't move. The night sounds around us, crickets, the distant bark of a dog, filled the silence. Finally, he whispered, "My brother." I reached for his hand. "His name is Jacob. He didn't know either. His adopted father told him his mother had died. He shook his head, eyes wide with disbelief. All this time, all these years, and she never said a word? She thought she was protecting you, I said gently. She's lived with that guilt her whole life. He stood abruptly, pacing the porch. No, Clara, she lied to me, to all of us. She let me mourn a father who wasn't even her first husband. She kept an entire child from me. His voice cracked, not just from anger alone, but heartbreak. Daniel, I said, stepping closer, please try to see it from her side. She was young, scared. She lost everything. He turned away, his shoulders tight. I don't know if I can. I didn't press him. I just let him stand there, breathing hard, the night wind tugging at his hair, because I knew what came next would be even harder. The next morning, Daniel called Lily and asked her to come over. He said she deserved to know too. By noon, she was sitting at our kitchen table, her hands gripping a mug of untouched tea. Her eyes darted between us as Daniel explained what I'd found. When he said the words, "another brother," her jaw went slack. Are you serious? She had a child and never told us? Daniel nodded grimly. Clara met him. He's real. Lily's voice trembled. And Mom just left? She was afraid. I think she didn't know how to face it all. For a while, none of us spoke. The weight of it all settled heavy in the room. The lies, the years, the grief. Finally, Lily said, "We have to find her. She deserves to know her son's life." Daniel hesitated. And if she doesn't want to see him, then that's her choice. But she deserves the truth. And so do we. We started searching again, this time with a clearer purpose. Daniel called hospitals, motels, and shelters, while Lily reached out to her mother's friends. 3 days later, we found her. She was staying at a small inn near Springwood, the same town where she'd grown up, where her life had splintered in two all those years ago. She didn't look surprised to see us, only tired. "Clara told you," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You left without saying a word?" Evelyn nodded, eyes fixed on the water. "I didn't know how to face you, Daniel. After you found those letters, I thought you'd never look at me the same. I don't even know who you are anymore," he said, pain sharpening his tone. "I'm still your mother," she whispered. "Just not the woman you thought I was." Daniel took a shaky breath. "You had another son? You let me grow up not knowing I had a brother." Tears welled in her eyes. "I thought he was dead, Daniel. I buried that grief deep because I couldn't bear to live with it." He shook his head. "You could have told us. We would have understood." She gave a small, broken laugh. "Would you? I couldn't even understand myself." I watched the two of them, my heart aching. Finally, I said softly, "Evelyn, Jacob is alive." She froze. Slowly, she turned toward me, her face draining of color. "What?" "He's alive. He lives in Greenville. He's married, with children. He never knew who you were. He thought his mother died when he was little." Her lips parted, a faint sound escaping, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "That's not possible," she whispered. They told me." I stepped closer and gently took her hand. "I saw him. He has your eyes." She broke then. The composure, the years of restraint. Her shoulders shook as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. Daniel moved instinctively, kneeling beside her, wrapping his arms around her trembling frame. For the first time since I'd known her, Evelyn wept without shame. Lily joined us, with tears glistening in her own eyes. I thought I was being punished, she murmured. All those years, I thought God took him because of me. Daniel's voice cracked. He didn't take him, Mom. You just lost your way. We sat there by the river until the sun dipped low, the water shimmering gold and silver beneath the light. It felt like something inside all of us, grief, resentment, silence, was finally loosening. Evelyn asked one question, her voice barely above a whisper. Does he want to see me? I nodded. Yes, he does. She looked out over the river, the same one that had taken so much from her, and closed her eyes. Then I'll see him. The next day, we drove to Greenville together, Daniel, Lily, and Evelyn. The air in the car was thick with anticipation and fear. No one spoke much. Evelyn sat in the back seat, her fingers clutching a small locket she had found in her drawer that morning, the one with baby Jacob's picture inside. When we pulled into Jacob's driveway, she hesitated before stepping out. Her hand gripped my arm. What if he doesn't forgive me? She whispered. I looked at her, seeing not the stern mother-in-law I'd once tiptoed around, but a woman carrying decades of loss and guilt. Then you'll still have looked him in the eye, I said softly, and that's more courage than most people ever find. The moment we pulled into Jacob's driveway, the air seemed to still. The late afternoon sun cast a warm haze over the quiet street, children's laughter echoing faintly somewhere in the distance. Evelyn sat perfectly still in the back seat, her hands folded over her lap. I could see her reflection in the car window, pale, trembling, her eyes glistening like wet glass. When Jacob opened the front door, everything stopped. He stood there for a long moment, staring, like his mind was trying to bridge the impossible gap between memory and reality. Jacob. Evelyn's voice wavered, soft, but filled with years of longing. He didn't move at first, then, almost hesitantly, he stepped forward. I remember you, he whispered. Not clearly, but I remember your face. Evelyn let out a sound, half sob, half breath, and took a shaky step toward him. My sweet boy. When they finally embraced, it wasn't the dramatic reunion you see in movies. It was quiet, trembling, sacred. Evelyn's hands clutched his shoulders as if to make sure he was real. Jacob held her tightly, his chin trembling against her hair. Daniel stood beside me, silent, tears welling in his eyes. Lily reached for his hand. For the first time, all of us felt the gravity of what had been lost and found again. Inside Jacob's home, time seemed to stretch and soften. His wife, a kind woman named Hannah, greeted Evelyn gently, offering tea and space in equal measure. Their 2 children peeked around the corner, curious about the stranger who cried when she saw them. Evelyn smiled through her tears. You look just like him, she told Jacob's son, just like you did. Jacob's eyes glistened. I guess it runs in the family. For hours, they talked. Or rather, Evelyn tried to piece together the years that had been stolen. She told him about his father, about how she'd searched, how she'd been told he was gone. Each sentence seemed to lift another stone from her chest. Jacob listened quietly, his thumb running along the rim of his coffee mug. When she finished, he said, I don't blame you. I think I've been waiting my whole life to understand why I always felt unfinished. Evelyn wept again, her face buried in her hands. Jacob reached across the table and took her hand. "You're here now. That's what matters." We stayed the weekend in Greenville. It was awkward at first, as reunions often are, but there was something beautiful in the awkwardness. On the second night, I found Evelyn sitting on the porch swing, the soft creak of the chains blending with the sound of crickets. "She did this," she said without looking at me. "You found him." "I just followed the pieces you left behind," I said gently. She turned to me then, her eyes full of something I hadn't seen before. Not judgment, not distance, but gratitude. For years, I thought silence was the same as peace, but it's not. Silence just keeps the wound from healing. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to admit. Sometimes the truth hurts more when it's hidden. She smiled faintly. "You remind me of who I used to be, before all the fear." Her words caught me off guard. Evelyn had never spoken to me like that, not as an in-law, but as a woman to another woman. "You were brave to come here," I said softly. She shook her head. "No, dear, you were. I only followed your courage." The next morning, Daniel and Jacob went for a walk together. When they came back, Daniel looked lighter somehow, like he laid something heavy down. "He's a good man," Daniel said quietly. "Mom raised us right, even when she didn't know she was still raising him too." I smiled. "You look like brothers." He chuckled, wiping his eyes. "Feels strange saying that word out loud. Brothers." Later that afternoon, before we left, Jacob hugged each of us goodbye. But when he reached his mother, he didn't let go right away. "Don't disappear again," he said softly. Evelyn's voice shook. "Never again." The drive home felt different. The sky was heavy with the promise of rain, and yet everything inside the car felt lighter. Evelyn sat quietly, her gaze on the passing fields, a small smile playing on her lips. When we reached home, she went straight to the garden. The roses had started to bloom again, their petals opening to the drizzle that had begun to fall. She knelt down, touching one gently, as if greeting an old friend. I used to think these were reminders of sorrow, but maybe they were just waiting for me to come back. From that day on, something shifted in our house. The silence that used to feel suffocating became peaceful again. Evelyn began to talk more. Small stories at first. About her childhood, her favorite books, the songs her mother used to hum. Then gradually, she opened up about the years she'd kept hidden. She and Daniel spent evenings on the porch, talking until the stars came out. Lily visited more often with her boys, and Evelyn laughed again, a sound I hadn't realized I'd missed. And once a month, we made the trip to Greenville. Jacob's family welcomed us with warmth each time. The children called her Grandma Eve, and though she cried every time they said it, there was joy in her tears. A few months later, Evelyn hosted a small dinner at our house, the first one since she'd come to live with us. The table was set with her best china, the air rich with the smell of roasted herbs and butter. Jacob and his family joined us, along with Lily and her boys. At one point, as laughter filled the room, I looked over at Evelyn. She was sitting at the head of the table, her posture graceful, her smile soft. For a brief moment, I saw her as she must have been all those years ago, young, hopeful, unbroken. After dinner, when everyone had left and the house was quiet again, she touched my arm. "You know."
She said, "When you first married Daniel, I didn't think we'd ever be close. I thought you were too different from me." I smiled. "You weren't wrong." She laughed softly. "But you saw me. Not the woman I tried to be, not the one I pretended to be for others. You saw what was left of me, and you didn't turn away." Her eyes shimmered. "Thank you, Clara, for giving me my family back." I felt tears rising. "You gave yourself back to them, Evelyn. I just helped you find the door." She squeezed my hand. "Sometimes that's all any of us needs, someone to open the door." That night, as I lay beside Daniel, he took my hand and said quietly, "You changed everything. You know that, right?" I turned toward him. "I didn't change anything. I just told the truth." He smiled, pressing his forehead to mine. "That's what changed everything."
It's been 2 years since that day by the river. The garden out back looks different now, fuller, more alive. Evelyn planted new rose bushes last spring, one for each of her children, and another for the son she thought she lost. She calls that one Redemption. It blooms later than the others, stubbornly, but always the brightest. Every time I see those roses, I think about how fragile we are, how one choice, one secret, can echo through generations. But I also think about how strong forgiveness can be, how it can rebuild what silence once destroyed. Evelyn still has moments when the past catches her off guard. Sometimes she'll pause mid-sentence and drift somewhere far away. But when that happens, Jacob calls. He tells her about his daughter's school recital or the new shed he's building, and her voice steadies again. Lily says she's never seen her mother so free, not since she was born. And Daniel? Well, he carries himself differently now, too. The kind of quiet strength that comes from knowing the truth, even when it hurts. As for me, I learned something I'll never forget. That love doesn't always begin with trust. Sometimes it begins with understanding, and grows only when we dare to listen to the stories that scare us. There was a time when I thought Evelyn and I would never be close. She intimidated me. Her grace, her reserve, her silence. But now, when we sit together on the porch, sharing tea and memories, I see the woman beneath all that. A mother, a survivor, a woman who once lost everything and found the courage to start over. I asked her once if she ever regretted that I found those letters. She smiled, that soft, knowing smile of hers, and said, "No, Clara. The truth was waiting for you because I wasn't strong enough to face it myself." That's the thing about truth. It doesn't just set us free. It humbles us. It reminds us we're human, and that healing doesn't come from forgetting, but from remembering with grace. The day Evelyn met her grandchildren for the first time, she brought them tiny jars of honey from her garden. She labeled them herself, in that neat, cursive handwriting of hers, "For sweetness after storms." When I saw that, I couldn't help but smile, because that's exactly what this family became, a sweetness that bloomed after a storm we never saw coming. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that families aren't built from blood alone. They're built from forgiveness, from courage, from the quiet moments when someone chooses to stay instead of walk away. Evelyn once told me, "The hardest part of love isn't losing it. It's learning to believe it can find you again." And she was right. Because somehow, against every odd, against time, guilt, and grief, love found her again. It found all of us. When I look at our family now, gathered around the table, laughter spilling into every corner of the house, I see the cracks, yes, the history, the scars, but I also see something more beautiful than perfection.
I see people who chose each other again. And maybe that's what rebuilding really means. Not pretending nothing broke, but loving one another enough to pick up the pieces anyway. So tell me, would you have opened that box? Would you have gone searching even if you knew what you found might change everything? Let me know in the comments, my dear ones. And if you've ever carried a secret that found its way to light, I hope you found your sweetness after the storm too. Until next time, this is Clara, just another woman learning to forgive, to listen, and to love again.